Hello, and welcome to another episode of Plot Mom. I am joined today by the amazing Chance O'Malley, whom we are going to be talking about creating mythology and religion and all those fun things that involve gods and usually curses and
Yes.
bad decisions all around. Anyways, Chance, take it away, introduce yourself, tell us about your experience here, and then we'll get right into it.
Cool. My name is Chance. I have been writing for a very long time, like elementary school, but in middle school, I decided that I was going to write my own mythology and religion for the story worlds that I was creating. Because I write fantasy and I don't have to base things in the real world. But I've been working on that for almost 20 years now. It's been a process, but it's been a fun process. So hopefully it won't take you 20 years.
The goal tonight is to make sure that it doesn't take you 20 years, because 20 years is too long.
Don't fall into my pitfall.
For the record, it also took me 20 years to get Where Shadows Lie out, which has a incredibly strong backbone of religion and mythology. So we're going to go into what we've learned in our process and how not to spend 19 and a half years more than necessary doing it. I mean, part of that is just growing up. Just don't start as an 11-year-old. That is like the main advice. But no. Apart from, don't be 11. Although if any 11-year-olds are watching, just write. Have fun. Don't care about any of the advice we're giving you. Just go for it.
Have fun.
But beyond that, let's get into this right now. And we are going to be talking about how mythology and religion is created by writers. We're going to be talking about cultural appropriation and misrepresentation, how it is bad. We're going to be talking about why mythologies and religions come to being in the real world and how it's different in fantasy world. And at the end, we're going to go into a few little bits and pieces about how to include religion and mythology in your book without giant info dumps. So let's start with the basics and let's just get them out of the way. Mythology and religion is hard and it is complicated and it is not necessary to every story and setting. We are going to be talking about it today, but before you go in and develop a pantheon and religious beliefs and all this really complicated world building stuff that can be a lot of fun to create, but isn't necessarily necessary for the story you're going to tell. So everything in this talk is going to be framed by, is it actually necessary? And if not, don't get world builder's disease. Let it be. But Chance, would you like to take us away with why cultural appropriation is bad?
Sure thing. Cultural appropriation and misrepresentation is extremely insulting, first of all, to the people that you're borrowing this from. Because if you're using it without context, then you're stealing something without actually having the background to it. There are lots of things in our real world that's don't do that. Like I have a Patronus and not something else, because that is not mine. And the same thing should go for your world. Like, if it's not yours, don't use it without extensive research and sensitivity readers.
Yes. Now, it's very hard. We get the advice, write what you know, and we draw from the real world in fantasy writing all the time. Religion is something that is very near and dear to people's deepest hearts and ethics and beliefs. So it's something that we should tread on even more lightly than usual on when appropriating, because you don't want to be that person.
No.
So here's my general rule of thumb. If it is a dead religion or culture, and I mean stone dead, no one is alive who worships this at all. There isn't a revival movement. There isn't there aren't descendants. There's nothing. We're talking ancient religions where everyone was basically a Neanderthal. You're probably fine.
Yeah.
You're good. if you're drawing from religious theory, from philosophy, from the like core foundational questions of religion, you're good. Those are universal questions and fears and things like that, and we're going to go into why those are incredibly important to think about. So study religion. Don't be afraid to look into real world religions, but don't copy paste them out of context. That
Exactly.
is where the pitfall is. So everything we're saying, please, please, please be respectful of real world religions and those who believe them and those who are descended from religions that aren't around anymore.
And if
Please.
someone from those groups tells you that you've done something wrong, change it. Ask
Yeah,
them what you've done wrong or how they would like you to change it or where you can look for information to do that because it's not their job to educate you on things.
absolutely. So, we're going to, within that framework, talk a little bit about why mythology and religion come to be in the real world. And for all of this, please really examine your own biases and your own ethics when considering real world religions, even in the context of analysis, because we all have biases. And we're going to read things and interpret them based off of those ethics and those moral codes, especially if you're villainizing or making the bad guys have a religion. Please, 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 please. We cannot repeat this enough. Please, please check your own biases and don't appropriate. But
Please.
that is the last we're going to say about this. I think we've driven the point home.
We've driven it home.
Nail
Don't do
on
it.
the hem. Listen, I'm a stone carver's daughter. Like hitting things with hammers is just what I do. It's a familial thing. It's it is. Anyhow, so let's talk a little bit about why real world religions come to be. And the first and biggest one that goes back way, way, way back in the dawn of civilization are primal fears. Religions are often based off of giving comfort or personifying primal fears, the dark, the other, hunger, death, all these really intense things that we almost all experience and that are in the world around us, the wilds. Chance, I'm sure you have some things to say about this as well in our
Yeah,
discussions.
it's you want to have something to explain these things. That's one of the big things about mythology and religion is that when they're developed, oftentimes, especially by ancient peoples, it's to explain natural phenomenon. It's to explain the things that are unexplainable. It's how does this thing happen? Well, I don't know because I have no way of knowing. Okay, well, clearly it's supernatural. A god did it. Or it's a god. That tree over there screams sometimes. We know that it has cicadas in it. They did not. That's a screaming tree.
Exactly. This kind of also goes forward in that disasters often spark religion. And
Exactly.
again, anything that is scary or inexplicable is going to naturally create some sort of question, which usually ends up creating some sort of faith. And when you are describing, fantasy religions, especially if you haven't thought about them very much or you've brought in other worldly religions, oftentimes we will borrow the religion without the fear or questions that created it. And that can create a religion that's very hollow and very, not really there.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
that doesn't make sense. That's the thing. Internal consistency, very, very, very important, especially in matters of faith, because faith creates such an essential part of a character.
Oh
If
yeah.
they believe something, that is a big deal. What are some other things that you think like creates real world religions, Chance?
Societal rules for sure. Just there are rules that you don't do that because that'll anger reason, but in this match
You are freezing up a little bit.
um
There we go. And you seem to still be freezing up a little bit.
Dang it.
Um, While we get that sorted, Jessica says, faith
Hold on.
helps push the character through the tortures we writers force upon them, which is absolutely true. Although sometimes faith will send the characters into the tortured situation. That is my preferred method of creating torment, at least in Where Shadows Lie. Hopefully Chance gets your video back on here because we have so much more to say. There we are, and you're back.
I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I was borrowed by a god, the god of internet.
Yes. Yes, indeed. We have angered the gods of the internet by speaking of them.
Yeah. But yeah, societal rules. That's the one I was on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's to borrow from actual real world religions. We'll borrow. Trying to think of one that is not really controversial. Eating pork.
Yes, I was actually about to bring that up. As a Jew.
Yep. Eating pork is a very important belief for several religions. And many times that was put in place to save the people who were eating it because they didn't understand disease, or not truly like we understand disease. They got that people got sick, but that was another thing they didn't fully understand and often had a deific force behind it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you had to make a rule: don't eat pork or you'll die.
Yep. So we have societal rules, we have natural phenomena and primal fears. The other big, huge category is cults of personality. Sometimes people show up and they have something to say, and they are listened to, and their personalities and what they have to say provoke a religion. We see this a lot, whether that person is the founder of a religion or simply a messiah within a larger religion, a fracturing of a faith. But these cults of personality do occur. They are a very, very common occurrence. And then we finally have manufactured religions and cults. These, again, tread on them lightly. They do happen. One could argue that they happen a lot, or one could argue that they don't happen very much. But when building it, it actually is a kind of phenomena that appears in fiction a ton, and it's because it's a lot of fun to have this to be manufacturing a manufactured religion, as it were.
Exactly. It's so good.
So that is a perfectly valid reason, and it does have real world implications. Now, when we're talking about fantasy, though, there are some big differences, and there's two primary differences. Chance?
First one, the gods and magic around them might in fact be real in a fantasy world. Like these things are real to these people, but they're also real in their world. It's not just a belief on their part.
Yeah,
this is a thing
provable.
They can do. Yeah.
They can actively do magic, and they can potentially actively meet a god, shake their hand, and be like, so what is the meaning of life? And the god just kind of, casually said, oh, well, it's 42. Everyone knows that. That's fact. Come on, guys. Get with the program. We've known that for years. So the other big thing that differentiates real world and fantasy world is that, again, monsters can exist. Those primal fears can be so much more tangible. There can actually be werewolves hiding in the shadows. There are, there can be good monsters and bad monsters. It just changes the entire relationship we have with certain primal fears when we can meet them.
The darkness out in the world could be an actual physical thing or person.
Or malevolence.
Just don't go in the fog.
Not personified monster is like the fog or the dark. I love them. They're so creepy and delightful. yeah, I could go off on a tangent forever about that, but we are going to try to like keep this reasonably moving forward. So, let's talk a little bit about creating a mythology and religion, and how a lot of people start out with a world, and they maybe have some characters and some politics and some fun things going on. And sometimes they start with a religion, but oftentimes the religion is one of the last things that gets peppered in kind of on the surface. And that is a major mistake, in my opinion. If you're going to include a strong mythology or religious element, it must be developed in conjunction with so many other elements, because it draws from, everything. It's about life. It's basically a meta-analysis of life on that planet, as it were.
Yeah.
So why don't we go over a couple do's and don'ts, and kind of just go through. If you're in the audience and you would like to chip in with your best tips and tricks on creating a mythology religion, we'd love to hear from you. We are far from all-knowing gods, although we write all-knowing gods sometimes. Like we're going to go into... Yeah. All-knowing is a difficult word.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I will start us off with my first and favorite tip and trick, which is start with the tangible elements that the religion is going to describe, such as geography, major events, major disasters, real gods, real magic. The religion is going to have to explain these things. So they're going to be foundational to it. Don't make up the religion and make up that separately. Include it. Expand upon what you've already built. Don't just add a random pantheon.
It ends up feeling very hollow.
Yeah. It kind of like, just you make a beautiful dish of something savory and then you just sprinkle cinnamon sugar on it. It just doesn't... That doesn't work.
Doesn't go here.
Yeah. Chance.
Sure. Do not cherry pick or copycat religions without their context. We talked about this earlier, but it's really important to keep in mind. Keep the context if you're going to copy something.
Absolutely.
Or just don't. don't copy.
It's hard not to, because our own experiences are completely based off of what we have experienced. So, there are certain things that we must copy. We must get a certain amount of, the ceremonial language from our experience with ceremony. We're going to get part of the regalia from our experiences with religious regalia. So it's impossible not to go into creating religion and mythoses without certain biases. But it's especially important not to just pick something out and put it in a world where it doesn't belong, like taking a Norse pantheon and sticking it in a desert world.
That wouldn't make sense.
It hurts. It physically hurts me. Every time I read something, I'm just like, oh, honey, no.
I'm just imagining ice giants in the desert, and it doesn't go well for them. I guess Thor's job is easier, technically.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it would be a great vacation spot for Thor, and if you're writing satirical comedy, just go for it. I would actually probably read that.
Oh, yeah. That'd be hilarious.
All right. So the next one. Don't assume that religion and fantasy will look like real-world religions at all. We've had a lot of examples of religions in our world, but don't assume it will look like anything out there. It could just literally, be completely unrecognizable and alien, and that can be cool. We see a lot of this in some really, really interesting sci-fi, but we don't usually see it in fantasy, which always bothers me. It's always basically pseudo-Christianity, pseudo-Islam, pseudo-Buddhism, and that's it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of variety.
Sometimes you have a pseudo-Aztec or pseudo-Norse.
Yep.
Those are the other ones. And it doesn't have to be that way. Please don't make it that way.
Branch
Please.
out.
Um. So,
Subject.
Chance.
Because hold on, sorry, motorcycle. Just because something is cool, that doesn't make it a good reason. Because it's cool is not a good reason to take something or to put something in. It needs a reason. Like, sure, okay, cool. I have this cool idea. Okay, but why is it there? Like,
yep. It's not a justification.
No.
Like, it's fine to write things just because they're cool, but that should be the foundation pieces of your world, not the things that are branched out of it. For example, Chance and I are going to be part of a D&D game set in a fairy world. This fairy world literally is a mountain with rings around it. We just had a discussion today about whether or not it had a sun, because there is no place for, like, moons and suns and stars or an atmosphere. So, because it's cool is actually fine as the kind of core foundational pieces of a world that could be really creative. But then within the context of that world, things have to have internal consistency, or you're just going to confuse your reader. So if your fairy world suddenly has Christianity in it, it's not going to make sense. They're going to worship the giant mountain in the middle of them. They're going to worship the strange lights in the sky. They're not going to worship some, random real world analogy. So next, I would like to talk about a little bit about how, unless your setting is super, super, super small, and I mean, like, one small town in one country, and they don't really travel outside of it, and it's a story about, it's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet as the baker's daughter and the fishmonger's daughter. Unless you're writing that, don't just write a monoculture. We have been so inundated with fiction that is just full of Planet of the Hats or Country of the Hats. And it's unrealistic world building. It is flat world building. Every religion is going to have, like, other religions that pop up, even if the gods are real, even if the same divinities are inspiring, the actual faith in it. It's totally 100% scientifically provable that they are gods. You're still going to have splinter groups. You're going to have the people who are like, well, the gods actually want this, but actually, no, the gods want that, and we're going to interpret it this way, and we're going to interpret it this other way. I do a ton of that in Where Shadows Lie, which has a set pantheon of real gods who really interpret things. And the way that the different peoples have, like, attached themselves to one god or another god and are actively antagonistic at each other about whether the gods like you to use magic or whether they don't want you to use magic creates an incredible amount of conflict in the story. And that's with tangible gods. So don't write monocultures. They are boring. Planet of the Hats is fine as a place to get a hat. Not a great place to tell a story.
Not really. Yeah. It's just unrealistic to write one culture, one religion on an entire planet. Even on an entire continent. That's not very realistic.
Yeah, like, think about the different religions that exist on your street.
There's so many.
That's the diversity you want.
You want to make the world feel diverse because the world is diverse.
And the more diverse it is, the more dynamic it is. Like, you have built-in conflict. You have built-in drama. And it's so much more interesting.
Exactly. It's one of those things, if you're stuck, hey, there are people who want to fight about this. Do it.
Yep. It's great for pantsers, especially, like, having a really solid basis of, multiple religions who all kind of hate each other it's great. You can just go off in any direction and you're always going to find conflict. And conflict, if you guys haven't picked up on it from the many videos I have made, is just the gold of storytelling. Fluff is lovely. Fluff is good. Everyone likes a good kissing scene, or at least most people, not everyone, but a lot of people. It's fluff, good, great. It means nothing without conflict, and it won't move the story forward without conflict. Religion is a great way to add it. Anyways, we're gonna go into some really quick do's and don'ts. So, first do, make beliefs that answer questions. Ask yourself, what are the big questions in this world? What questions are you asking as a world builder? The religion should answer those, because guess what? The people in the story are going to be asking them too. Chance.
Don't add unnecessary complexity to things. Expand the idea, don't add. You don't want to bog people down with a bunch of details that don't mean anything or won't add to the story. You don't want to have your reader go, okay, I feel like I'm reading a textbook here. Why? This has been 2 pages of telling me this, and I don't know why.
And we've gone through like 12 different creation myths, all of which are a lie. It's just not that great. No. So do have memorable and simple touchstones. Who read Dune doesn't remember I will not fear, fear is the mind killer. It's iconic and it's simple. We remember the trees with the bleeding eyes in Game of Thrones. We remember these like strong, iconic images that sum up in a very show don't tell way what the religion is all about. So pick a couple very iconic themes and very iconic motifs and just ride them out as far as you can. Put them everywhere you can, and then expand upon them. Give us the reactions of different characters to seeing this. See how it evolves through history. It's so exciting when you can just see something in a book and be like, oh, no, I recognize that from like 3 books ago, and that's so cool, and I remember it because it was clear and straightforward and repeated often enough to become a motif.
Yep. Don't build this beyond the scope of the story you're telling. By that I mean if you have elements that don't actually connect, again, you've given them details that, while interesting, aren't furthering your story.
It's just unnecessary.
Yeah, it's
like that's how you catch world builders disease. That's how you end up like us.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do it. It's bad.
It's bad. If I could go back to 11-year-old me and be like, don't do it, I would. I definitely would. I wouldn't have listened, but
no, I was really stubborn as an 11-year-old writer. I was still writing everything phonetically as an 11-year-old and thinking that it wasn't a problem.
I mean, you had to. Were you writing it in English or were you writing it in Italian?
I was writing in English. It was very bad. My poor early readers who still supported me, and oh dear God, I do not know how they did. So again, just don't be 11 anymore. Do read extensively in philosophy and instill your religion with a moral complexity. Black and white faiths usually end up with a war, and like that's fine if you want to tell a story about war, but it's going to be a boring story if there's a good side and a bad side. So give your religions moral complexity. Don't make one vilified and one perfect. It is not A, not realistic, B, not particularly fun to read, and it will create kind of a flat world building. So give your religions depth and pull from actual philosophical questions at the core of those like big building blocks of the religion.
Don't apply your ethics to your world's religions. You have biases. We've talked about this a couple times now, but your perspective is narrow comparatively to a world perspective, but you're building a world perspective. So you have to go outside of your own beliefs, your own ethics, your own morals, because these people don't necessarily have those things. These gods definitely may
Yeah.
not have these things.
And like, there is nothing wrong about writing about your faith. We've seen this a lot. Of Narnia is blatantly Christian fiction, and it's still enjoyable and fun and has good messages. So there's nothing wrong in putting your faith into something you write. In fact, I encourage it. It's fantastic. I am a non-practicing Jew, but I have a huge bent in almost all the religions I write about questioning the dogma and how you don't just take things for rote, you analyze them and you think about them. That's a very Jewish thing, and I'm fairly obvious about it. But do be aware that your audience may not share those beliefs. Now, if you are writing for a very narrow audience who you know will share your beliefs, that's fine. But be aware that it might not be read the way you intended, and that you might be hurting someone or offending someone, or you just might get some flack for it, which is not the end of the world. Not every book is for every audience. So just be aware of your biases and be aware of who your audience is when you're working on your religion. Chance? We have a list, but it's on a different tab, so it's always like.
There you go. Don't assume that the religion and myth are going to be static in time. Usually they rapidly change according to new challenges that are faced and just alien situations. And if a religion can't change, normally that's why it dies.
Yeah, like it will be every time that something new happens in the world that pushes people to question their beliefs, either the religion will step up and answer these new challenges and questions, or it fails. Oftentimes the way they answer isn't all that great, and it can be a little gaslighty and awful at times, and like, write the bad stuff. Don't be afraid to write a religion that is evil, as long as it also is based off of real fears and is like, it can be doing evil things and not be again a black and white evil entity. Like, religion can be positive or religion can be negative. That's just, how it goes. And there's a big market for, the bad guys in the church, the Spanish Inquisition. Like, it's out there, and there's nothing wrong with that, just the same as there's nothing wrong with writing a religion that you deeply feel about in a positive light. So do, in that vein, do include a realistic amount of religious tension. Religion becomes foundational to people's ethics, and therefore it creates a potential for conflict, both within the religion itself, if factions are fighting about what the true meaning of it is, or between other groups that don't believe the same thing. Religious contention is something that we've seen throughout our history and continues today. It is a difficult topic for a lot of people to read about, but it is also a really cathartic topic to write about and to read about. So do it sensitively, but do be realistic in the fact that not everyone is going to be okay with every religion.
Exactly. And leading into our next don't rule out the wild misunderstandings about what a particular piece of religious article means, or lore, or anything like that, because people are gonna disagree. That's just how that goes. Within the same religion, people disagree. That's why there are different sects of the religions, because people disagree about the beliefs. And that's just, people are going to have absolute, just misunderstandings about what is happening, because, well, that's not how I view it. Well, that's how I view it. Well, I think you're wrong. Well, I think you're wrong. And that's how a holy war starts.
Yeah, but adding to that, when talking about fantasy in particular, don't forget to, include that the gods might not be down with their religion. or they might be fighting amongst themselves, or they might be picking humans off or playing favorites. Gods in fantasy are powerful forces, and they can absolutely sway religions in ways that we cannot see in our real world quite as much, because to my knowledge, one has not like stomped down at 100 feet tall and like, you know, well, I mean, they're all over the Marvel movies, so maybe those are actual gods. We don't know. These things are mysteries. But in fantasy, they can. They can just show up for dinner and tell you off.
Yep.
They can take the religion that is, being awful in their name and be like, nope, you know what? I denounce you. That is cool. That is drama. That is fun and interesting world building. Something that a audience, Brandy, or a powerful leader gets a hold of a religious text and fixes it.
Yeah, that is another really big thing. They'll just be like, I don't like this. This doesn't follow the way that I believe. And thus they try to change the way everyone believes.
Also, even if they aren't that actual like believing, religions are pathways to power. And unscrupulous people can and have taken religions and taken people's faith and belief and twisted it for their own, whether it be financial gains or ideological gains or military gains, what have you. That is a realistic thing to add into your fantasy, especially if you're looking for like a bad guy or something. Someone who twists a perfectly fine religion is an excellent place to go. And finally, let's not forget the language barrier or literacy. For a lot of our history, the people who spoke for the gods were the people who could read the holy texts. That has changed a lot in today's world. Chance, you're getting the rattling sound again, so I don't know what's going on over there. But so
weird.
I do not know. But what I'm saying is, if you have a world where literacy or the printing press is not widely spread out, that could absolutely inexorably change your religions and what you are building. So, take that into account. We are going to kind of shift veins from some more general suggestions into things to consider when building a religion. And these are like the things that you should really, really think about adding. Now, as an addendum to this, please do remember the cardinal rule of don't catch world builder's disease. Write exactly as much about the religion as your story needs. Religion should help tell your story. Mythology should help tell your story, not be just an endless info dump of strange information. So let's talk about some things that you should consider adding to your religion. Chance, take us away.
Sure. So some of the things you want to consider are like the rituals and celebrations. Those are huge things in religions. That's how do people come together and celebrate, or how do they come together with different peoples? Do they have rituals around meal times? There's rituals and celebrations for everything, especially in past religions. They had a lot of, no, this is how this goes, and this is how this goes. This is how you say hello to this person. This is how you say hello to that person. There are rituals and celebrations for almost everything in ancient cultures.
Yes, and it's very interesting which comes first, the ritual or the religious explanation for the ritual. Do make pay attention to that, because like we see it a lot in like Christianity that kind of absorbed a lot of other religions, where we'll have these rituals which on the surface have been painted in a Christian veneer and underneath are still very similar to the original, other religion ritual that they were kind of adopting. So there can be incongruities, but consider why they're there and in which order they appeared. Another thing you want to consider adding are your various time of life rites, your birth rituals, your funerary rites, your coming of age rituals. Kind of fits under the fits under the umbrella of rituals and celebrations, but anything that is a universal experience. Everyone is born, everyone eats, everyone breathes, everyone dies. Those are the things that are usually celebrated by a religion in one way or another. Other things like, having babies, not everyone has babies. Getting married, not everyone gets married. While there probably are rituals around these, they are less obligatory, whereas birth and death absolutely will take a place in a religion, because every single religion at some point answers the question, where did we come from and where are we going?
Exactly.
Those kind of the existential questions. So the other thing, and Chance, if you want to tell us a little bit about this, are Messiah stories.
Absolutely. Messiah stories are really interesting. Like a lot. I'm not going to say almost all because I'm not a religious studies person. But many religions and belief structures have some kind of ultimate person that is going to come and save the people or lead the people. Clearly, from Christianity, the example is Jesus. There's all kinds of ones like that's.
And some have already come, and some will come one day.
And there will be disputes about whether a Messiah has come or not. That's one of the huge conflicts between Christianity and Judaism. Has the Messiah been here? Christians say yes.
Jews say nope. He was cool, but nope.
He was definitely a holy man. Like, he definitely did good things and religious things, but no, he wasn't the Messiah, guys.
Yeah, cool yourselves.
But Christians will literally go to war for that.
And generally, at least from my understanding of religions, a lot of religions that are waiting for a Messiah are peoples who have not necessarily been a dominant people and are looking for someone to take them somewhere or pull them out of a situation or give them a home, whereas a lot of religions that have had a Messiah have a very close attachment to the place that Messiah showed up and what that Messiah taught them and kind of why that is the way that they must maintain.
And Messiah stories are also a way to give people hope, as
yes.
keeping with the what is religion doing for someone. That Messiah story can keep people going. Yes, things are terrible and things have been terrible for our people for so long, but one day our Messiah will show up and save us from this. He or they will lead us out of this terrible time.
Aware of in fantasy where prophecy and messiahs collide.
Yeah.
It's really easy to accidentally write a chosen one who happens to be a messiah and not actually think it through. So Dune, for example, is a very clear example of a chosen one messiah done really, really well. It was thoughtful, it was just interesting, it was tied into the entire working fabric of the universe and was very connected, therefore it works really well. Whereas some chosen ones just kind of end up forming kind of cults of personality around them, and maybe it was intentional and maybe not, but religion is a big thing to heap on a chosen one. And oh dear, I am having a call. You can go away. That was fun. Anyways, so
musical interlude.
Gotta love forgetting to silence your phone, right? Gonna do that now. All right. So Chance, do you want to talk a little bit about how religion is passed on and how it's taught?
Yeah. Now, religion is often passed on and taught by holy people. We talked about how a lot of times in the past, only the people who were the priests or the holy people in general even knew how to read. And so that's a thing. Who are the holy people that might pass this on or keep it from people? What are there things that are taught to different kinds of groups?
Is it
And
written down?
is it written? Is it just an oral tradition? If it's an oral tradition, how has it changed over time? Because that is how oral traditions do. Like, they will change over time because people embellish, or they add details, or they add something that they think is really cool but wouldn't have ever actually happened, and
And if it's
exaggeration.
written, has it been rewritten? Has it been amended and added to and reinterpreted? Or is it a very, is it the 10 Commandments, which are pretty straightforward and like boom, boom, boom? Or is it the entire, Torah or, whatever? Those are incredibly different ways of passing something on.
And the size of the amount of information is also dependent on who might be able to learn or teach it, because not everyone is going to have the time and dedication to read several books of the religion that they do follow, but it's a lot of things for a common person to think about in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. Got a comment that can also cause conflict. Certain people did not want the Bible to be printed so easily. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Considering the holy text to be holy in and of themselves and not to be replicated is a really common thing. Whereas, some holy traditions won't speak certain names. All of those little details are really quite telling to the culture. And again, everything you do in creating a religion is about reinforcing the cultural values and the environment that the religion is taking part in and the history that created the mythology. Religions are a tool to showcase the world you have built. You're not creating an actual faith. You're not creating something that you have to follow. You are creating something to tell the story you are telling. So do that. don't just kind of endlessly reinforce this internalized mythology that will never actually make it onto the page.
Yeah.
We also need to talk about, when creating a religion, what are the core ethics of the religion? So what are those big societal imperatives that the religion is trying to teach? Is the religion trying to teach you forgiveness, or is it trying to teach you defend your own? That's going to really depend on the environment the religion was developed in.
Chance, you want to is revenge a thing that your gods encourage, or is it a thing to be punished afterwards? Like, there's all kinds of ethics. Like, is murder a mortal sin? Can you repent for those kinds of things?
No, there's a couple books that I've read where murder isn't considered a crime. It's considered a thing that happens. But where rape, for example, is a horrible crime. You would never violate someone's consent, but you can murder them in the street.
Murder them, it's fine.
And again, so those biases that we come into things with, they don't have to apply in a fantasy world. Decide what the ethics of your culture are and try to imbue them everywhere in the culture. Remember how we talked a little bit about motifs? This is where those motifs can be really important. Building your motifs off of the core ethical questions and ethical answers that a religion creates. Then there's also the question of just communication. If the gods are real, who do they talk to? And if magic is real, how is it assimilated into the religion?
Are there only certain people in the religion allowed to use the magic? Can everyone, but are people forbidden? What's the reason for those things? Why are they forbidden? Why can't this group use magic even if they have it?
So in Where Shadows Lie, my debut novel, we have the same gods and two major religious factions currently vying for power. One religious faction is a very, very powerful magical school who get a lot of power and influence by saying magic is divine and magic is good and you must worship us because we control the magic. We are magical and therefore worthy of the power that you have vested in us. And then there is there are monarchs who are really scared of this, and they're saying, no, magic makes the world an unequal place because some people are born with magic, and therefore magic is something that should be just for the gods, and it is immoral to use this thing that raises you above others. It's completely, ridiculous because they, of course, also by their birth are raised above others, but their point is, we raised ourselves. Our ancestors did this. Magic is random, so therefore it is immoral. Those kind of big questions about these large forces that can and will give you power. A god could literally give you power. Suddenly, who talks to them and who gets to use them become a religious matter.
Yeah.
And economic and society. It's so tied together. So the next point I kind of wanted to talk about is, does your religion have an enemy?
Yeah, is there an ultimate evil, or is there just enemies? There doesn't necessarily have to be an ultimate evil in most religions, in many religions, though that is an extremely common theme, is having the one being or idea that this is the most evil thing in the entire world.
Yeah. And also, within a religion who is persecuted, because there are very few religions out there that don't have an outcast
somewhere.
Even the really, really nice ones who are peace on earth and everyone is welcome usually have someone they hate. It's a sad but true thing. So consider, does your religion hate someone? And if not, is there a very good reason? It's usually whoever doesn't agree with their ethical code.
Yeah.
In the simplest form. Whether their ethics are good or bad, whoever doesn't agree with them is usually an outcast. Now let's talk a little bit about symbols. We've brushed on this with motifs, but people generally like having symbols, especially readers. How we don't forget them. We don't. They are iconic, and for the same principle, they are iconic to the people who are around them. For the people who worship, oftentimes having, that necklace with a symbol of your religion, or, that tattoo on you, or the book, in the corner, or the mask on a wall. It doesn't matter what that symbol is. They are the reminder of the religion in your everyday world.
Yeah, people have religious iconography throughout their houses, and some people, they're not even actually religious anymore. They're just, these are decorations that I like. But a lot of them started as, this is a reminder of what I worship, what I believe in, what I don't want to do. Pictures of the art of what happens to people when they go to hell and that kind of thing. That is another symbol. You've shown, no, I don't want to do that. Well, okay, well, now you've been given a symbol of what the consequences are.
Absolutely. Another thing really to consider is sacred locations. Where is faith practiced? Where is it not practiced? What constitutes a sacred location, and does it have to do with the lore, or does it have to do with the people?
Yeah, did the people decide this? Is there a reason that they've decided on this specific place? Is it because a meteor landed here hundreds of years ago and our people have returned here every year to come and get something?
Yeah.
Or that's where a god landed.
And there's also, when you're looking at religions that are ancestor worship and not pantheon worship, you have places of religious significance to individuals, family shrines, burial grounds, things like that can be incredibly important. Oftentimes we also have haunted spaces, places where things have gone wrong. Those are often absorbed into the religion again to give an answer as to why this thing went wrong or to keep it from going wrong again. So anything that has had a major dramatic impact on faith is usually going to gain significance of its own. And in fantasy, that could be a tangible magical significance. But it also could not. It could just be spiritual and emotional, and that is fine. Not everything has to be magical or supernatural in fantasy. So another very, very big question that you should be, asking yourselves while creating a religion is it questioned by the populace, whether part of it or not? And does it have an internal division that is, trying to break it apart or arguing? And is that division at all attached to gender, age, race, etc.? Socioeconomic status, you choose. Caste. Caste can be a big one.
Oh yeah, definitely. The religions that believe there is a group of undesirables for one reason or another. These physical living people have not done anything wrong usually, but because of their bloodline, because of where they live, others think that they are lesser, that they don't get to do things, they don't get to be around not the unwanted.
Absolutely. And oftentimes the moment a religion spreads in a geographical sense of the word spread beyond easy communication range, it starts splintering. Because priests from one area or sacred people from one area can't communicate easily with the people outside. If there's a centralized organization, it can't reach everywhere. Money doesn't go everywhere. And suddenly you have splintering, people reinterpreting things, people going off and forming their own cults within that religion. So geography, again, can create splintering. Events can create splintering. Something horrible happens, one group explains it this way and one group explains it that way. These are major components. And other things to consider are, how does it deal with people of other faiths? Because if you're not writing the Planet of the Hats, there will be.
Who do they conflict with? Who are they allies with? Who do they kind of feel ambivalent about? Which is also important. Not all religions are going to think anything of all of the other religions. Oh, that's over there, cool. Then you don't care. Yep. But there are others where you're like, they're evil because of these beliefs, or these people are good because they have similar beliefs to me.
Then there's, okay, you're dead. What happens after that? Religion should probably answer it.
Yeah. Is there a place? Is there a good place? Is there a bad place? Is there a neutral place? Is there something like purgatory? And this goes into, maybe there are other planes or worlds. Maybe these are actually places you can go visit.
Absolutely.
If you know how to get there. Mount Olympus, if you could climb Mount Olympus, you could get to the gods, technically, according to beliefs.
Yeah. And depending on the afterlife, you might actually be able to bring people back in fantasy. Having those answers, if anything, in fantasy is even more important than in writing something that happens in, a very low fantasy, because those questions might have very different and very tangible answers, and figuring out how that spreads. Because a lot of religions are based on the fear of death.
Oh, yeah.
And if death isn't a given, if immortals exist or resurrection exists, that fundamentally changes one of the primal fears that most religions are based off of. That's a big deal.
And that's going to
don't underestimate it.
That's going to change how people interact with their lives. If there is resurrection, why isn't everyone being resurrected then? Which is a question you have to answer. Why is this common problem not being solved altogether?
Absolutely. And then the question is, Well, if it does, because assuming that there is an answer, people will at least try. They might be thwarted, but they'll at least try. What would the consequence be of letting it happen? So if resurrection exists and everyone's resurrected, and then you suddenly have a fantasy world where overpopulation is this horrible concern, and you have people being resurrected again and again and again, and maybe magic's being depleted along with the environment, and we don't know. Maybe the source of magic were the souls of the dead, and now there aren't any dead, and we're all fucked.
Stop telling people about my plot. No.
Lip seal, promise. So, like, in one of my worlds, your soul lives after death as long as you're remembered, which means that the moment you encounter immortality, that changes everything. I have a character who is immortal, who hates living, who does not want to be alive, but who feels like he has to live on because there are so many people that only he remembers anymore. And if he dies, they are gone forever. And that burden on his soul and on his spirit is immense. So again, if there are like beliefs that are affected by magic, go the distance. Think of it. If this, then that, and keep going until you reach the final destination, because it will be so much richer if you keep enlarging what you have instead of randomly throwing in an extra god. Like that won't make a difference. That won't be memorable. But expanding things in an interesting and realistic fashion, that will be absolutely interesting and memorable. And let's talk about evil. Rawr, evil.
Yeah. Like, it's everyone thinks of something as evil. There's something that is trying to hurt you and your people and want harm to come to you for no reason beyond harming you, really, like, or getting revenge on something that isn't your fault.
Evil is also very profitable.
Yeah, it is.
Many religions have concocted evil to gain territory or funds or followers. Yes, comment. Thank you, Jessica. Let's talk about evilness, Allegra. Yes, I am the evil that you should all be fearing. Sweet face, but 100% wickedness. But evil is a financial tool in many religions. And to kind of go into that, how is your religion funded? How does it interact with the politics around it? How does religion influence what people's daily lives are like? Do they take tithes? Do they decide that this town will get a new well, in which case they can literally buy allegiance? And when faith buys allegiance, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate the incredible political power of faith. That should absolutely be in your fantasy world, or at least be considered. It's okay to write faith that is just faith. There's nothing wrong with that. But oh boy, can it be twisted. And if you can't tell, this is something that really pleases me. So write me books I like. Write me books with twisty-turny churches. In fact, write me books with good churches that are twisty-turny, along with the bad churches that are twisty-turny. Every flavor.
Working on it.
I know you are. That's why I keep you around. All right. So, finally, we might have noticed that we didn't talk about gods anywhere in this section. That's because we have a whole section about creating gods. So let's talk about some creating gods. Because they're fun. I mean, who doesn't love the sexy Loki trickster god, right? Anyhow, so speaking of Loki, Chance, our pet peeve.
Don't just copy Greek or Roman or Norse pantheons. It's so overdone. Like, yes, these are religions that are not as followed now. They are still followed. Do not think that they're not.
Do your research. Get sensitivity readers.
But these are just a lot of fantasy and sci-fi use just pseudo-Norse pseudo Shinto. Like it uses things that are familiar, and that's not bad. Like people recognize these things, and that's definitely a draw. If you present someone with something completely alien,
Tropes aren't the trope isn't a bad word. Tropes are
exactly.
touchstones. Tropes are fine. Religions that are real aren't tropes.
Yeah.
And also, religions that have been used in fantasy vaguely disguised as something else for eons aren't original or fun. In fact, they're cliched and
Very
boring,
cliche.
and cliches are a bad word. Tropes are not. Don't write cliched religions, kids.
Boring. Super boring. Are your gods perfect? Like, can they do anything? Can they die? Can gods die in your world? That's a completely different question. Like,
question that I am answering. The next book that I'm writing is called The God Killer. So we're gonna be going god hunting.
Yes. You need to determine if they're perfect, if they're omniscient, if they're omnipotent. And with those things, you have to be really careful. Because if they know everything, it's just a big thing that's not.
Yeah, you can get away with an omnipotent and omniscient God that doesn't interfere. You cannot. I challenge anyone to write a story that isn't satire or horrible about an omniscient, omnipotent God who has his hands in the business of the story, because they just fix it. They know everything.
It feels like one of those 16-page novels.
Yeah, no, it's not particularly fun. And the Brendan Sanderson's second law is the limitations should be greater than the powers, and this applies to gods just as much as it applies to magic. If you have overpowered gods, then you have just overpowered your story. And power creep is real. So wherever you place your gods, that's kind of the pinnacle of your power creep. And power creep is a force that we cannot control fully. It will happen to the best of us. If you put omniscience and omnipotence on the table, someone will try to take it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Nobody wants someone else to be all-knowing over them. That's not a lot of people. They're like,
So if you are going to do it, as Jessica says, omnipotence does not mean interfering. So the only situation in which you can really get away with it is if that god or gods or pantheon or whatever is just like, nope, you fuckers are on your own. Deal with it.
Set it up. Now it's yours.
That's fine. That's fun. That's great fun. I love that. Like, go for it. It's actually quite original and fun. So when we're creating a pantheon, especially now, again, there are many things. Don't get caught up in pantheon. Consider ancestor worship. Consider worshiping natural forces. Consider reincarnation cycles where the goal of the religion is to better oneself and there aren't gods. Those are all really valid and really underutilized. And please consider doing that before you just write a pantheon. But if you're going to write a pantheon, there are some things you can do. And to make each of them memorable, associate them with a question, a fear, or some other simple, straightforward, very clear thing. There's a reason why we remember the god of mischief and the god of lightning and the god of volcanoes. It's because they're the god of blank, single word, nice and bubbly. That is going to help the reader understand these gods and understand why someone would worship them. It's very easy to understand why someone would worship the god of death. They either want death for others, or they want to not die, or they want to be safe after death. Those are reasons to worship a god of death. But if it's the god of, death, taxes, and chocolate, the message is super muddled.
That's confusing.
So, um, try try to give each god a singular motif. It will help your readers a great deal, and it will help you keep them straight. Also, give them a reason to exist that is associated with the story that you want to tell. If you're writing a story about rogues, write a trickster god. If you're writing a story about justice, write a god of justice. Give the people that you are writing about a reason to believe in these people, because you will be able to showcase your religion so much better from the point of view of someone who deeply believes it or is deeply antagonistic to it. Anyone who's kind of just blasé about religion, why is religion in your book?
Why does it matter? Like, if it
it's
doesn't matter
not
to the
affecting
characters,
the characters or the politics of the world, why is it there? It's fine to write a fantasy world where religion just isn't a big deal. It's there in the corner. Put a stamp, put some kind of random thing in there and let it be. If it won't interact with the story, don't write it. Don't catch world builder's disease.
Don't do it. Get an immunity now.
I do like, from one of our people, the god could delight in the pain of his creation, for I believe an omnipotent god, and I'm so down for this.
That's super true. That's also a really good one.
Give me sadist god. I'm.
Oh yeah,
we'd be friends.
It's really cool to do that. Like, and don't be afraid to like I said, motifs are important. Don't be afraid to cover your god of fire in fire things or fire references. It's okay for the god of chaos to wear mismatched clothes if they want. Like, they make them fun, make them memorable, like I said. Like, just, these people want to remember these, and they want to be remembered.
My kind of trick to creating really memorable gods is I create them like monsters. Yes. If I saw them for 1 second, would I pee my pants? Either by their beauty or their horror or their extra. That is what I want in a god. I want something that is literally makes my knees tremble. So when I write my gods, I have one who walks around in fluttering red veils, and when she pulls them off, her face is covered in eyes apart from blood red lips.
Nice.
She's creepy. She appears in all of one scene, and oh boy, she steals it. And that's what you want from a god. Yes, she does. And so you want that for your gods. Again, motifs are like, they're the cheat sheet between you and the reader. They are the thing that connects this grand ideal to the story in a tangible way.
Also, if you can't think of a name for your god, you can just put fire or magic, and then you can come back and make a name later, so you don't get stuck while if you're writing and you're like, oh yeah, I need a god of this thing, name, and then you get stuck in name building, which is part of world building. It's a specific symptom.
Yeah, it's a specific hell.
It really is. Like,
I finally broke myself out of it. Yeah, it took me 20 years, but I finally broke my habit. I used to always stop and find the right name, and now I'm just like, XXX did this.
Yep.
There's a lot of Bobs in my high fantasy until my final draft, because I'm just like, nope, I don't care. Just you're Bob.
Yep. If this isn't a character that is important, don't bother worrying about a name.
Yeah, I think I got it out of my system because I have a character who's a namer and he sees everyone's names. And after that, I was just like, I never want to name another NPC ever again. Don't make me come up with more fantasy names.
The torture we put ourselves through for writing.
Being a writer is fun, kids. Definitely do it. Again, if there are any 11-year-olds out there, keep writing. It's worth it. No, really, actually do keep writing. Please.
It is. It's actually a lot of fun.
All right. So, next, let's talk a little bit about applying religion and mythology to a story without doing info dumps. Haven't we all read that fantasy that starts off with a creation myth? Tell me,
It was
how
long
many of us have
ago.
stopped reading a fantasy because it started off with a creation myth?
It's just too much information at once. Like, if you add all of the names and all of the details, and it's very, very hard to get through. Like, setting up world building in your story can make it very boring. It's a problem.
Can.
Like the Wheel of Time series, I tried to read it. I can't get through the first book because the first 100 pages are unbearable amounts of world building. And
Yeah,
I'm a world builder.
I know it's so like backwards. We would love to write it all, but we don't want to read anyone else's.
Jesus Christ, man.
Like, and it's
Back
so
it up.
weird because if I read a story and I love the story, I will then read an entire manual about that world. I'm
Oh,
totally
yeah.
down for reading the world building. I just don't want it in the first half of my books.
Yeah.
I want some
Don't
story to
try
go
and hook
on.
someone with that. It's not going to hook them, I promise.
Yeah. And so we have the, say that you've created this wonderful religion, you've tied it into the geography, into the politics, into the primal fears and societal pressures of this culture. You've created characters who are, and a story that really require this religion to exist. You've done everything right. You've gotten your sensitivity readers to make sure that you haven't gotten anything horribly wrong or are hurting anyone, and you're ready to go. But how do you communicate any of this to the reader? It's really scary.
The info dump is so easy.
It is. As Vixen of Fiction says, I don't want all the information before I care about it.
Exactly.
Very, very well said. So, first of all, my biggest suggestion is apply a character's religion to the choices they make throughout the entire story, from the first page to the last. If they're making ethical choices, their religion is going to be a part of that decision making. Now, it might be doing what the religion has told them, or it might be discovering that the religion is too simple to explain this complicated thing. It might be breaking with their religion, but what they believe should influence the decision making process that they go through.
Definitely. And I think it's also really important to make sure that you have the symbolism of it all through your book. The icons, the motifs. If someone specifically follows a very, very specific single element kind of thing, their home will have that kind of thing. Just show people the surroundings that have these religious ideas or faith ideas behind them.
And words. People attach themselves to words. Going back to Dune, I will not fear, fear is the mind killer. That for me was an inspiration for the entire religion in Where Shadows Lie. I decided that I wanted to base each element of my faith on these like little oaths that the characters swear. And it is something that you choose for yourself, and that it becomes the core of your being. To be remembered after life, you must live up to this oath that you swear over and over and over again. And my different characters all believe in these different gods and different oaths, but the way they interact with the world all follows the same basic principle of they will interact with the world based on the faith in their oath. And so even though it's the same religion, it has an incredible impact on the story because each and every one of the characters is reacting to it. And because of that, it's repeated again and again and again, and it becomes a motif. That's the goal if you're going to make religion a big part of your story, is that by the end of it, the reader understands that religion without ever having read the holy text, because they've seen it in action. They've seen it in the everyday lives of the characters they've been following. Chance.
Yeah. One of the things that you definitely want to keep in mind is how the different belief structures and religions affect the geopolitical sphere. Like, how does that translate? Do people from this region believe that this is the good way to run their people because this is what the gods tell them? Or do people think that that's nonsense? Is that going to cause a conflict? Yes, it is. Spoiler, it'll cause a conflict.
Yeah. If you're looking for a source of conflict in your book between nations, consider religious tensions. They're super relatable. You can make both sides absolutely be right in one way or another and yet still be in conflict. It's great for morally gray nations and factions because you can have two religions that are both preaching something genuinely good, and yet how they go about it is in some way clashing. And religion will have shaped the history of a nation, which means it will shape the culture of the nation, which means it will shape everything about it. Talk about the food. Well, if there's been religious wars and it's been a wartime thing, we're going to see different food than if we've been in a time of great peace under a single religion. If certain foods are demonized, again, just talking about food as an example, but you could go on for 100 pages, but don't. Show it in the little details.
And another interesting plot point you can go through is testing your characters or or even just the NPC's faith. Just actually put them in a position where they have to decide between what their religion wants them to do or what society wants them to do. Just put them in a dilemma that really gets to their core. And you want them to, at the end, during this, you want them to wonder, am I right about what I believe? Does my God actually care about me, or do my ancestors actually care about me? Just have them have something that makes them question their core beliefs, because it's good story, if nothing else.
Yeah, you really want to, for almost all of world building, only actually put on the page the tip of the iceberg, but have the entire weight of it pushing the story forward. Your world building shouldn't appear on the page as much as it should push the narrative at a steady glacial force of you cannot stop it, and that's what good world building does. It's unstoppable. It is a firm, large presence, kind of giving structure to the small story, because even if you're writing a story about someone saving the whole world, it's one person's story, and you can write one person's story. And I hate to break it to you, but even the best world builder out there cannot world build every single detail of an entire world.
Don't do it. Don't try. I promise. Don't do it.
And it's not worth it. Find the stories and the things that actually move your plot along. Find what is necessary to tell the story. And when you hit upon that perfect parable, that really amazing, religious story or myth or something that absolutely connects to where your story is going to and is going to inspire your character or frighten your character or give your character a vital piece of information to achieve their goals, that's when, not in the prologue, but once your reader is involved, that's when you can stop and around a fire tell a story. Keep it short, keep it on point, make sure it has a purpose and will drive the narrative forward. If you have these random wonderful mythology pieces, do what Chance does. Publish them on a blog. Give them to readers as extras. They'll love it. If they love the story, they will adore the extra world building, but they may never love the story if you put it all in the book.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to make things exciting and engaging with these things. When you're implementing them, don't have it just be, okay, yeah, no, the god of justice definitely saved my people once. Well, that's great, but how?
Give vivid details.
What else happened?
Just imagine that you're spilling the tea about something real dramatic and tell that story. Okay, origin stories, great, cool. I want to know about the destruction stories. I want to know about when things go wrong, because guess what? Most books aren't about things going right or things being created. They're usually about things going wrong and things about to be destroyed and having to stop them, especially in fantasy. Conflict-filled story. So talk about the conflict. That is the gateway into the religion and how it deals with that conflict. So we have been here for almost an hour and a half. That is half an hour longer than we were planning on doing this talk. But, you know, religion is a big topic, and we haven't even scratched the surface of it. And that's the point we're making. We've both been building a religion for 20 plus years. Spend an hour and a half on it. You can answer most of these questions in like an hour or two.
Just write down questions you have. Work with those.
Do your research too. That will take a little bit longer. Dot all the I's and cross all the T's. World build to the story you are writing.
Yeah.
And when you're doing a religion, fundamental thing, make sure the limitations are greater than the powers unless you have a plan to deal with it. Don't just write a Planet of the Hats or copycat and pantheon from another world. It is not the way to win over things. Give it motifs. Let it answer the essential existential questions that the characters and the society are going to face, and let it be a genuine source of conflict for the world, because it will be. There's no way to talk about these big and major things without some kind of conflict coming on. So with that, if anyone has any final questions, we would be happy to address them. But in the meantime, Chance, why don't you tell us all about how to find you and how to support you?
Sure thing. I run a blog, like Allegra said. I put essentially rough draft versions of my chapters up on there. I have just today, I'm finishing up the last update I need to do, and then the backstory portion of one of the stories will be up on the website. And I have an archive with a lot of things I wrote in 2019. 2020 has been crazy.
Yes, it has. It just got crazier. There is a spider creeping towards me on my window. So when we end this, I'm going to run away screaming.
That's fair. But yeah, so I have the blog. And I have a Twitter as well that I sometimes update. I'm not too good at it. I also have a Tumblr that I reblog things that I find interesting creatively. And I can give my my blog information to Allegra so that she can give it to y'all.
Perfect. And if you are new here, I am Allegra Piscatori. I write fantasy and science fiction and a whole bunch of other stuff. My novels Where Shadows Lie and NaCl Eye of the Storm are out on Amazon. You can find them in the links below. We also have a fun and cheerful writer Discord, and we have a lot of fun there, and we do a lot of these kind of discussions all the time. I am always on there. So again, link is below. If you are not there already, we expect to see you there right now. And have an absolutely wonderful time. If you are not in the live audience, or if you are and you have more questions, please feel free to leave a comment. Tell us about your religion that you created. Tell us about how it impacts your characters. I want to hear about all the cool things people are doing. Tell me about your awesome pantheon and the ethical dilemmas and your god of, what was it? Death, chocolate, and something.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, something. Yes, but tell us about your wacky gods. And have an absolutely wonderful time. And again, I'm going to say this, we've been saying it at the beginning and we're going to say it at the end. Please, please, please be sensitive in your world building.
Please.
With that, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Good night.
Y'all have a good rest of the night.